this is Jennifer Beamer, owner-operator of Actually Dyed Art by Science, and this is the daily vlog, episode number 52, and it's a retro episode. So I filmed this video maybe 45 years ago, and it sounded like I said 45. I'm not that old yet. I filmed this at least 4 years ago, probably more like 5 years ago. But the content is actually still valid, and if anyone is interested in spinning cotton, here's my kind of weird, not super scientific or well-researched approach, because one of the things that I learned about being a fiber artist and working a lot with different types of fibers, there's a lot of transferable skills, and I kind of wanted to see what my body knew. So in this video, I talk a little bit about what I did for the process, and I did several examples so that I could kind of use different skills to see if I can find something that would work a little bit better in this progress towards actually spinning cotton, which until this point I had been very afraid of. And I also did a blog post, which is something that I posted a long time ago, maybe 2014, I'm not sure. So I will link that below, where I've actually got some of the close-up shots of the various samples that I did that you will soon see in the video. But anyway, I didn't want to lose this content, and sorry if it's a little bit outdated if you have followed me for that long. But if you're new, and if you are new, thanks for watching, and subscribe if you like this content, because I will hopefully put out more content like this in the coming year. And it helps encourage me to pursue one type of material over another, because I try to adapt what I post to YouTube based on your interests. So the more you tell me what your interests are, the more I can adapt the content that is mutually beneficial for all of us. Hey everyone, this is Jennifer Beamer, owner-operator of Actually Dyed Art by Science, and this is the daily vlog, episode number 52. And today I wanted to just share with you guys on YouTube that I published the results from my cotton spinning challenge, which was from April 15th to May 15th. And you can actually read all about this on the blog, which I will post below, but I wanted to sort of just tell you a little bit about what I put on each of my cards. Now, in total, I made 7 samples, and when I set out with this project, I was operating under the assumption that I knew nothing about spinning cotton. That's a lie. So, many years ago, maybe 3.5 or 4 years ago, I decided, you know what, I want to learn how to spin cotton. So I bought this big bag of cotton, loose cotton, like this, and I was just kind of jumping in there. I did research a little bit about how to spin cotton. I sort of had an idea of what you needed to do, but I didn't actually spin anything. And then fast forward about 3.5 years or so, and I'm in Korea, and I decided, you know what, I should probably do something with this. So when I was in the Ravelry chat, people were like, I kind of want to learn how to spin cotton, and I've done it before, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, I don't either, let's do it together. So I wanted to just sort of see what my spinning skills told me. So there's this like concept of spinner's intuition. So it's basically taking what skills you have as a spinner and what the material is that you're using, and like using them together to sort of make the yarn happen and identify what the yarn is telling you, especially if something isn't working out right. So for my first sample, all I did was I took this organic cotton together with all the little bits and pieces, and I just carded it into a little puni, which was kind of like cigar, like a cigar, what are they called, cigarillos or something? They're like little mini cigars. That's kind of what it looked like. And then I spun this 2-ply sample, and it's full of like little like super teeny short pieces of cotton, and there's a little bit of vegetable matter. But some of the notes that I decided to take on here were which sample number it was, because that was going to become important. The idea meaning that I was going to progress from beginner to maybe not quite so beginner. I included information about where the cotton came from. This was grown organically, which I am led to assume that it means it was grown without pesticides, but that's probably a bad assumption to make, and the seller is no longer selling, so I can't get a hold of the person either. I lost the rest of the information that came with this cotton, which is actually very unusual for me. So sorry, I don't know exactly what organic means, but you know, there's the label. I made it a 2-ply just in case I couldn't tell by looking at it. And I also decided to include how I spun it. So I spun this on a drop spindle, and I also included some information about, you know, like twist in some cases. So I wasn't sure exactly how much twist I needed to make this yarn work, so I just kind of added enough until it looked okay, and then I applied it. And then I washed it sort of how I would wool. Now, I know that they're different fibers, and I knew this going into it, but I was trying to operate with spinner's intuition. How would I wash wool? Well, I would wash wool like this. So that's how I approached the cotton. And then I also made sure that I dried it without any weights. So it may not be super easy to see here, but the yarn is twisting in on itself a little bit. Okay, now because I added these notes here and I can see the attached sample for it, I can make a lot of observations about what maybe I did wrong or what could be better, or, you know, things to try for future samples. So, you know, maybe 10 years from now or something, and I happened across this one single sample that I made, I would be able to read all this information about how I spun it, what tool I used, how I set it, and everything. I could then go back, take a look at this, and be like, well, I think it needs this. And then I could sort of pick up where I left off. And that's sort of what I did as I continued on. I think I started doing research by number 3 or 4, sample number 3 or 4. But I continued on making cards, attaching the sample piece to this. In some cases, I used both sides of the card because I made more changes or I elaborated a little bit more. And for this one in specifically, I decided to make 2 specific changes. I decided to try to make the poonies a little bit tighter so that when I drew it, it would sort of kind of draft into the yarn more naturally. Turned out that wasn't quite how it worked. And then I spun the singles with a higher amount of twist. And for pretty much samples 2 through 6, I tried to increase the amount of twist that I was using for each of these cotton samples. And then, because sometimes when you make small samples, you kind of start to lose sight of what the goal is. And the goal is to be able to produce enough yarn to make something, right? It's really hard to make something with these little bitty samples, although you could if you wanted to. But it doesn't really help you get into a spinning rhythm because you're starting, stopping, and then sort of trying something else, right? So what I did for the 5th sample was make a much larger version, which is what I have here. And instead of using this organic cotton, I had some just commercially prepared combed cotton top, and I carded it into some poonies, and then I spun the poonies with my drop spindle, and I added considerably more twist for this sample than I did for my earlier samples. And the result was a very even yarn, a lot of ply twists, singles twist and ply twist, but even after letting the yarn sit so that the amount of twist I put in sort of relaxed a little bit, I still ended up breaking it at about 3 or 4 different places. it's very frustrating when this happens, but it's also a learning lesson, so you kind of have to go back and figure out, well, why was it breaking? This was just a 2-ply. It wasn't supposed to break. I added more twist than I thought it should need, and then, you know, it still got weak in those spots and drafted apart. So, you know, these larger samples help you see problems that you may not see if you just did the small samples. So then I did another sample where I was attempting to work on the fiber preparation, because I found that with working with just the combed top, there were some problems I wasn't facing, like vegetable matter, really teeny short fibers. Cotton isn't very long, right? Maybe inch and a half, right? But there are smaller fibers as you get closer to the seed of the cotton ball. There will be fibers maybe 1/4 of an inch, and those little bits, when they get kind of all wrapped up on each other, they will form a noil and sort of weaken the yarn if you are trying to build a nice strong yarn. So what I did was I did my best to sort of pull all those little bits out, and then I carded some ponies, but it still wasn't quite how I wanted it, so I moved on to sample 7. Now, I'm an archaeologist, anthropologist, museum professional. I love doing everything that I do with Expertly Dyed, but I have sort of a different background coming into all this. So I really like experimenting, I really like testing, and I also love the concept of experimental archaeology. So when I was doing my cotton research, I happened across this one video of she's a cultural anthropologist, I forget her name now. She decided to sort of go to this one place in South America where people were actually still spinning and making these particular cotton bags, but they were pretty much dying out. Almost no one was doing this anymore. So as an anthropologist, she wanted to go there and sort of preserve some of this cultural history, oral tradition, and in doing so, she sort of raised awareness for it a little bit, and I guess they experienced a small bit of revival. But, you know, watching these women who had learned techniques from generations before, which of course probably built on previous generations. I mean, the information is pretty simple and very easy to carry forward, but if you don't write it down, or if you don't have someone who embodies this tradition, it's easily lost. And then trying to figure out how to get back to that point is much more difficult. You need people like experimental archaeologists doing that. So what I did was I invoked the spirit of the experimental archaeologist with this last sample. And it's really my crowning glory, because what I did was I watched this woman. She took the fiber, and I didn't have her exact preparation, but she pulled open the the cotton ball, and pulled out the seed. She pulled out the seed, and then she sort of laid the cleaned, prepared, mostly aligned fiber in these sort of long rectangular stacks. And then she took sort of a bag of rice or beans or something like that, laid a cloth over it, and then she put out the sections of this hand-opened cotton, and by beating it with a stick and like folding it over and beating it some more, she was able to sort of make this giant cotton bat, which held together very well, that you could then spin very easily. And then of course, little light bulb turned on, and it was like, let's see if we can do this. So basically what I did was a similar concept, but instead of using a bag of rice, because that would have been loud, and someone else who lives with me would have been really annoyed with me, I basically put a pillow between my legs and, you know, held it really firmly so I can get a real firm surface, and then I beat this cotton to do that same thing, and it turned out to be exactly how I needed to prepare it, because this, like I said, has all kinds of stuff in there, and it cleaned the cotton using this process, and it aligned all the fibers so that when I drafted, they wouldn't either clump up, or, you know, the small, like really short fibers were more spread out, so that when I spun the yarn, I didn't get any of these noils. And again, I kept adding more and more twist until I thought it was going to break, but then it didn't. There we go. And instead of just doing all of my samples like a 2-ply, I decided to incorporate a 3-ply because it's a different kind of ply, right? It looks different, it feels different, and I wanted to see how durable I had made my singles. So when you Navajo ply or chain ply a single into a 3-ply, you essentially pull the yarn through a loop and keep making these long loops as you're imparting the ply twist. Now, the singles that I was spinning were extremely fine, so I had to be very careful with how I was pulling this through, because if I caught just a little bit on anything, I would have ripped the yarn, and that would have been really devastating for me. But by being very careful, pulling it through the loops, and having a very well spun single without any noils, I was able to produce kind of an intermediate yarn. So I'm very happy with how it turned out. And I have immortalized here on my card all of the information that went into this last sample. And I even wrote down that this was the end of my spinning challenge. So, you know, in the future, if I want to come back to this challenge and see what I did, I will know that this was my first challenge. I can even put the date on there. I probably should put the date on there. You know, so I know that if I come back and I try to do a similar kind of challenge on my own time or with somebody else or whatever, I will, you know, be able to look back at what I did, when I did it, the notes that I had on the card about each individual sample, and with, you know, the spinner's intuition, the plethora of fibers that I play with in the future will all have an impact on how I approach a sample challenge, or sorry, a spinning challenge like this in the future. So, you know, keep this in mind when you are doing your fiber study or breed study or whatever. Really, you know, push it to the limits. It's not just, oh, this is how it looks as a 2-ply and then you're done. You know, really try to delve into this particular fiber, especially if it's one that you know next to nothing about. There's lots of stuff that that specific fiber can tell you, and even if you come into it completely green, you have no idea what to do with it, let the fiber tell you what it wants to be. Anyway, I hope you liked this video, and will hopefully give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and you know, if you have any comments or questions about future spinning challenges like the cotton one and the future silk one, let me know, and I will, you know, sort of add it to my list, and hopefully, you know, we'll be able to learn a little bit more about some other fiber in the future. Anyway, thank you to everyone who has subscribed to my channel. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye!